Welcome to Peach Pie. If you haven't already, go ahead and click that subscribe button before we get started. I'll wait. Alright, so let's go ahead and get started. So what we're going to do, we're going to factor these expressions here. And factoring is basically splitting up your expression or splitting it up to where it's a multiplication expression. And so the way you do that, you're going to find your greatest common factor between the terms and kind of pull it out. And then you're going to see what's going to be left inside parentheses by using division. All right, so let's go ahead and try. It's a lot easier once you see it. All right, so what you do here, so I have 5x minus 5x cubed. And what you do, you want to find the greatest common factor between these two terms. So we can see here that 5 and 5, the greatest common factor between the two would be 5. Okay, but here we have an x and an x to the third power. Each of these terms has at least one x in common. So what I like to do, I just take out the lowest exponent with the same variable. All right, so they have a 5, they have a factor of 5, and they both have at least one x in common. So basically you're pulling out that smaller exponent. So I'm going to factor out a 5 and take one x from each one. Now you're going to ask yourself, you can find what's left inside parentheses two ways. You can divide, or you can ask yourself, 5x times what will give me 5x? 5x times 1 will give me 5x. Or if you divide 5x by 5x, you get 1. All right. Bring down our minus sign. We can divide 5 by 5. We get 1. But we took away one of those x's. So we had 3 x's. If we take away one of the x's, since that is an x to the third, we're left with x to the second. All right. And so we factored this expression completely. How do you check it? Just go back and multiply through. So let's check it. 5x times 1 is 5x minus 5x times x squared. So bring over my 5. That's the understood coefficient of 1. It's like multiplying 5 times 1. And remember that when you're multiplying exponents with the same base, you're simply adding them. So x to the first times x to the second is x to the third. And so we can see what we had originally before we factored that expression. All right, so I factored this expression completely. All right, so let's take a look at this second expression here. We have negative 16b plus 32. What is my greatest common factor? My greatest common factor is actually 16. So sometimes if you see that if one of your terms is divisible by the other term, that is your greatest common factor, because 32 divided by 16 will divide evenly. So my greatest common factor is 16, so I could factor that out. And normally we don't factor out a negative unless both terms are negative. So I'm just going to factor out a 16. All right. Negative 16 divided by 16 is negative 1. We don't put 1, we just put negative. We didn't factor out a b because that 32 did not have a b. So we had to leave the b inside. And then 32 divided by 16 is, of course, a positive 2, which is why we put plus 2. All right. So I factored this expression completely because I can't factor out anything else inside the parentheses. If you want to check it, 16 times negative b, negative 16b, and 16 times 2 will give me 32. All right. So let's try this last one here. So since both of these are negative, I'm going to factor out a negative. All right. I have 14 and 21. They are both, the greatest common factor between the two would be 7, because 14 divided by 7 will give me a 2. And 21 divided by 7 will give me a 3. So if I factor out a negative 7, because they're both negative, Negative 14 divided by negative 7 is a positive 2. Bring down my v. Again, could not factor out this variable because the 21 did not have a variable. All right. Minus, well, not minus, jumping ahead. I'm looking at this as a negative 21 since that's a minus 21. Negative 21 divided by a negative 7. That is a positive 3. Because remember, a negative divided by a negative is a positive. If you're not quite sure, let's check it. Negative 7 times 2v, negative 14v. Negative 7 times positive 3 will give me a negative 21. And you can see we got what we had originally. All right, so I factored this expression completely. So let's try these two problems here. Let's factor these expressions. They both have 3 terms, and they're a little longer. They have more variables. So let's try these. So we have 3 different terms here. 5g to the 5th minus 10g to the 3rd minus 15g. Between 5, 10, and 15, they have a greatest common factor of 5. But that's not it, because each of them have at least 1g. So again, I'm taking out that lowest exponent. This has an exponent of 1, so I can factor out one of those g's, because each one of these have at least 1g in common. All right. So now let's divide. 5 divided by 5 is just 1. All right. And if we take out a g, all right, we have 5 g's here because this is g to the 5th. If we take away one of those g's, so 5 minus 1, we just leave me with a g to the 4th. All right. Minus 10 divided by 5, or we can say negative 10 divided by 5 will give me a negative 2. I took away 1g, so since this has an exponent of 1, 3 minus 1 is 2. So g to the 2nd, because I took out one of those g's. All right. Negative 15 divided by 5 is a negative 3. I took away one of the g's. If I take away 1, I don't have any more g's left. So that is it for this one here. And so I have factored this expression completely because they don't have any other factors in common or variables in common. All right. Again, let's check it. Multiplying back through 5g times g to the 4th. Again, remember when you're multiplying, you're adding your exponents. So that's g to the 5th. Negative 2 times 5 is negative 10. Adding your exponents, g to the 3rd. Negative 3 times 5 is a negative 15. Doesn't have a g here, but I can bring down my g. And as you can see, I have what I have originally, so I factor that expression completely. All right, so let's try this last one. We have 40p squared minus 10p plus 30. All right. Easy thing to do is look at your lowest coefficient of 10 here. And we can see that that 10 is divisible by 40 and 30. So that is my greatest common factor. So let's factor out a 10. All right. And they all don't have p, so that 30 does not have a p. So we cannot factor out a p. And we just divide. 40 divided by 10 is 4. I'm just going to bring down that p to the 2nd because I did not take out a p. Negative 10 divided by 10 is a negative 1. I'm just going to put that 1 here for a space holder. And bring down my p because I did not take out a p. All right, so that's negative 1p. We don't really put 1 when we're writing expressions, so I'm just going to erase that. I just want to show you why there's just a negative p. All right. And then 30 divided by 10 is 3. So I factor that expression completely. Check it. 10 times 4, 40 p squared. Just bring it down. 10 times negative p, negative 10p. And 10 times 3 is 30. So now, of course, when you're doing your own work, you don't have to write out that you checked it, but I would check it mentally just to make sure I factored the expression completely and I've gotten all of my signs correct. All right. And so we factored these two expressions.